today, Poppy and I worked on all of the basics that we established in our first 2 sessions, continuing to try and build her understanding of it, see if we can elevate it some and put it all together for yourselves to see what we're working on here at Train My Dogs. So whenever a dog is learning a new skill or a skill that's been established but in a new distracting environment, I want to make sure that they understand the behavior that I'm asking them first. So for a SIT, what we're looking to do, of course, I'm sure you've practiced being dog owners, is taking a treat to that nose, lifting it just up and over their head. Yes. So in order to continue following it, they're sitting that bum on the ground. That lure eventually becomes a hand signal, which is just our palm open, up, lifted up slightly, as we call Poppy, sit. Yes, good girl. Having a visual cue helps a lot. Dogs are much more visual. They process the world better that way unless they have any sight issues. But hopefully we'll get to a point where she'll also be able to respond to a verbal cue. But if for whatever reason she doesn't, giving her some extra information through a visual cue is a lot more helpful than repeating a cue. When we're talking about a cue, we're talking about asking her to perform something and being rewarded for that action. When we're asking a dog a cue, we want to say it clearly, confidently, exactly one time. If your dog isn't responding immediately or within about 2 to 3 seconds, they don't know it, or at least in the context of what's been presented, and we might need to do a little bit to have it make sense for them. So, let's see. For a DOWN, of course, it'll be a little easier if she can get up on the ice. Hi, sweet girl. Getting them into a sit is much more helpful once you're practicing this at the beginning. You can lure them straight in between their front paws. So in order to continue following the treat, they've got to lower their body, kind of scoop their head down as they're laid into that nice position. Now, I'm pretty picky with downs. I like to teach dogs not to just go into the Sphinx position where they're activated on all of their elbows, but that they can shift their hips to, yes, one side and their rear end to a much more relaxed, settled position. That is called a relaxed down or a settle. I like to teach it as a regular down, so it becomes their default. So every single time we ask them to perform this cue, they're able to relax themselves, so that way they are able to be more comfortable in the position, and it'll help them stay a little bit longer knowing that they're much more comfortable in it as well. Again, like any cue, we want to make sure as we're establishing these expectations, the behavior for going down is there first before we're asking her to actually go, Poppy, down. Yes, good girl. She's already pretty good at this one, but again, it helps to understand the different ways of establishing what we want her to do. Yeah, I know, sweetheart, because eventually what we're trying to do is go from here down to here. Yes, good girl. So our visual cue for down is just pointing down to the ground, right in between their front paws. I encourage you to treat her down and low in between her front paws too, even if she's gotten good at this. It'll help her stay down. Dogs are taught to follow a lure when we're using positive reinforcement a lot of the time. So if we place it too high, they might reach for the stars or get out of a position that we might have asked them to be a little bit more settled into otherwise. I also like to teach a dog how to understand that consent is totally their own, important. They have their own autonomy too. So something that we worked on last session in particular was her being able to offer herself for any type of engagement. So what I want her to know is that anytime a hand comes for her, a treat will too, something really high value. And that if for any reason she's not into it, she doesn't like what is being given to her, or she's just not in the mood, that we're going to observe that. But of course, we want her to get a little bit better, and that when she's comfortable with doing it at all, that we can put a cue to it and ask her this instead to be invited for, rather than assuming that she'll be comfortable being handled at all. Yes. You can do this by having an open palm right in front of her, for her to slide her chin over with a nice treat lure. So that way, in order to continue following the treat, she's got to go over my hand. Pull my hand away. Yes, good girl. We want to find a stopping point to it as well, that it's not continuous at the beginning. So that way when we have a beginning, yes, good girl, there's an end to it too. So she's not constantly stimulated. Highly encourage you to do the other side, yes, where you are petting her from up top. She's much more sensitive here, but I also want to make sure that she's practiced different parts of her body. If you notice she retracted a little bit in that moment, she's not comfortable with side work as much as she is with under the chin. She's able to observe a little bit more, but practice it however you can. With handling, we want her to be able to perceive handling well from a person in front of her, on the side of her, behind her. As long as she's in a trusted institution, she should be fine. But we don't want her to be surprised, and we want her to hopefully begin to understand that pressure from a light pet equals treat. But it'll get there. And even in time, with all of this practice, at the beginning, she still might be a little hesitant, and that's okay. Part of this is just understanding her boundaries, so that way she can be comfortable and know that we'll never push her. She did very well. Yes, good girl. Other thing that we established today, this one was a little bit new, is working on a place cue, teaching her how to get on and off a designated surface when we ask her to. This is pretty simple. First, I'm gonna get their attention. Bobby, yes. Lure them onto a cot, bed, or blanket, yes. All the way onto the entire surface. Lured into a relaxed down. It might take a moment. Yes, there we go. Once they get into it, we want to work on the other aspect, being lured off. You can use some kisses. Puppy, puppy. Yes. Some types of vocal encouragement to kind of get her moving. That's totally okay. Just as long as we're not asking her OFF just quite yet. I want her to just get used to, again, the action of being able to be called on a bit. We haven't put a verbal cue to it yet, so we're not going to say anything. We're just getting her onto a surface. That's step one. If she's having a hard time with anything in particular, I'd rather you focus her getting all 4 feet on top of it, then into a sit, then into a down. Biggest challenge is try not to say any of those words. You can use vocal encouragement, things like all the way or puppy puppy, compliments, but try not to say any of this. I want her to just get used to being guided on and off of it. Yes, good girl. Woohoo! And eventually we'll pair more too.